right, we are live. Today is Wednesday, November the 14th, 2018. This is a regular meeting of the Pitkin County Board of County Commissioners. We are starting our day a little bit off the norm. We are starting the day with two members of the Board of County Commissioners getting stuck with needles. They are getting their flu shots on Grassroots TV so people in the public can see how painless, how smooth, and how much needed these flu shots are. So Liz and Karen, are you taking over?
Is it true?
Needs to give me a permission slip.
Is it true that we're auctioning off the rights to insert the needle?
I offered and it was denied.
Good.
$100.
John, are you getting one too?
Rachel.
Yeah. Is it okay? I'm going to get undressed. It's a little weird.
This is your chance, folks.
Okay. Well, why are flu shots important, Karen?
Sure. So thanks for teeing that up for me.
Segueing us in there.
Thank you.
So as we know, getting a flu shot is partly about protecting you and getting yourself vaccinated so that you have less of a chance of getting the flu. It's also about protecting our whole community so that we know that there are certain folks in our community that are unable to get the flu shot, people that are immunocompromised, folks that are have other restrictions about getting the flu, children under 6 months. And so really when we think about flu shots, it's about getting the flu for you, but it's also about getting the flu for the whole community and protecting our whole community from spreading disease. And I'll let Liz talk about some of the things that we can do to prevent the spread of disease in general.
Well, with flu season upon us, we're in the surveillance period. Flu season has started. There are already being cases reported across the country and in Colorado. So the best line of defense against the flu is the flu shot. The flu shot cannot give you the flu. It does boost your immune system. So some people might feel tired and achy for 24 hours or so after they get the shot, but that is not the flu. The flu is a very serious illness. The CDC is reporting that last year 80,000 people died from influenza or influenza-related illnesses last season. That's a high.
Can you repeat that number again?
80,000. And that's up from over many years of doing this. You know, the numbers would be around 30 to 40,000. Last year was a serious year. So we're encouraging people to get the flu shot. You can get the flu shot anywhere in many different locations. Most pharmacies have it. Target, City Market, all the grocery stores and those pharmacies have it available to you. You can get it through your workplace. Health fairs, Community Health Services is available to give you flu shots too. You can call us at 920-5420 for an appointment and for information about the flu. But if you get sick, I guess the first advice we'd say is please stay home from work because that's what's primarily how you're going to infect your coworkers and potentially those people who can't get vaccinated for whatever reason. Cover your cough. Wash your hands. Washing your hands is proven to be the simplest, most effective method from spreading disease. And when you cough into your elbow, not into your hand, because that spreads things around when you go around and touch things. So, anything else to add?
Well, just on the last year, we had double digits of folks that were actually hospitalized in Pitkin County for the flu. So we feel like it maybe doesn't affect our community or doesn't affect our family and friends, but actually people were hospitalized from influenza last year. And so it is a very serious illness that people can die from still.
So I will take
happy note.
volunteers to step up and get their shot. There is a couple different presentations of the shot. There's one for, of course, children aged 6 months up to age 64. There's what's called a high-dose vaccine for folks that are 65 and over, which has more antigens, if you will, in it that help boost the immune system because as we get older, our immune systems aren't as strong as they used to be. So it's highly recommended that folks 65 and over get that high-dose vaccine. And so there you go.
That would be me.
That would be okay.
Steve, no crying on camera, please. Look at that pout lip already.
In case I cry.
Now, why has he chosen not to have it in his arm?
That's not an option.
Versus.
He needs it because he's going off to New York And so we want him to come home healthy and not bring
Get
anything
a
back.
close-up of the camera zooming in. here now.
Steve is singing at Carnegie Hall with the local choral group for the Messiah. He's singing at Carnegie Hall this Sunday after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, congratulations to the whole
They're
choral
excited.
society.
We had to practice giving each other shots when I was in the Army. Saving shots.
Oh, look, ah!
No tears.
What?
Oh.
You're a nurse.
It's too easy.
You want me to give John the shot?
Okay, last
Up to
chance
you,
to the
Patty.
public.
Do
Who would
whatever
like to
the board
administer
Liz
this
is ready
shot?
to roll.
I don't know if I signed a release for you, though.
And you don't give a shot of something you didn't draw up yourself.
So while
I haven't had
Rachel's
the
getting
flu in
her
10
shot,
years because of
I will talk about herd health.
What?
With our cattle, we would vaccinate our cattle. I would call them their flu shots every year. And if you would happen to miss one, if you vaccinated all the others, that one probably would stay healthy because the others would stay healthy, and the one calf wouldn't come down with the different respiratory things that they get. And so the herd health is the more people who get the vaccination, it helps the whole population stay healthier because there will be fewer people getting sick and then passing on to those who don't have the immunity or didn't get the immunization.
So are you saying that we are like your cattle and we're in a herd?
It's the same principle. It's a population of, of humans, and the more people who get the shot, the healthier the whole population. Right. Even if we don't have 100%.
easy peasy.
I guess it's me.
There you go, John.
Already done. Wow.
Now, John has a tendency to faint, Liz, just so you
Just,
Screams too, right before he faints.
kind of fun to watch your county manager. Big tears welling up.
Hat on to help
I know, I was
John.
gonna say, I forgot a T-shirt. I put my Basal Vista maybe a size too small, so sorry for everyone on the camera.
Look at him, he's getting nervous, his palms are getting sweaty.
Now, why the bigger needle?
It's the one she tapped on the table, so it barbs the end of it.
Yeah,
I bet your kids love going to the doctor with you.
He would have been shot in the military lined up making jokes like that.
Well, we're all having a little fun with this, but it is a very serious matter. Every now and then you read a story in the paper of some high school football player who comes down with the flu, and next thing you know, the parents are like, I didn't know a flu shot was so important. I read a story along those lines at Grand Junction Sentinel not long ago. So it's not just the very young or the very old who are susceptible to death from the flu. So
Main thing is, remember to wash your hands, use hand disinfectant if you're traveling. That's really critical, because we know so many of us come back from traveling and we bring things back home with us, so those are critical things. And it's hard to remember to cough in your arm, but the kids all do it, which is the best, because kids don't know any different anymore. They don't use their hands, even little tiny ones. You cough into their arms.
I'm sneezing lately.
Oh, Rich is getting one too. So Phyllis, are you getting one?
I'm done.
Okay.
She's done. Okay. All right.
So
I
are
highly
we,
recommend getting those from Liz. That was
She's very
easy.
good.
I taught her all she knows.
The most important part.
All right. Is this the last one we have waiting?
We've got two more, but you can start.
Okay, we can start.
Just no screaming while we're.
Just no interfering. So we're going to move on with, do we have any additions or deletions to today's agenda? John?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, we do not have any additions or deletions.
He's still
to
concentrating on
agenda.
the, not
I know.
crying under the pain.
It's holding my arm.
So now we're going to move to public comment. This is for items that are not on our agenda. If any members of the public would like to speak, please come forward and give your name for the public. we have any members of the public wishing to speak? Lee, would you please come forward? We are allowing 3 minutes of public comment because we have a rather lengthy agenda today.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I'll try to be as brief as possible. I just found out from the mayor that the joint BOCC meeting with council on APSHA, he's pushed to the last meeting of the year.
The meeting is the 11th?
December 11th.
It's December 11th.
December 11th. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful to this board for authorizing John to do the investigation. And I just wanted to ask, do you know when would that be done? Before December 11th?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. I know my time's short, and I really want to thank again the board for and Jeanette for putting the evidence in the record last month. And there were a lot of COs in the record, John, and those were the COs of my neighbors. And the reason that was significant, I'm sorry to get in the weeds, but the reason is because we were all out of compliance with the residency requirement. And that is on page 18 and this is also in the record, of the writ of certiorari that the United States Supreme Court has. So I just want to point that out. The reasons those COs were in there is to show you the dates, because unless you were able to build a residence within 1 year, and I know, many of you know that is super difficult to even get through planning in 1 year, then you were out of compliance with the deed restriction. This is news here. The court, and I'll leave this, or you already know about this, but Judge Selden next door ruled, and he quotes, he denied I brought the petitions into the court also, but he denied the public hearing. He said such a request must be directed to the local government agencies of jurisdiction. Recently, yesterday actually, APSHA's attorney, who you guys are fully aware of, who has been a very controversial attorney, he sued a citizen for doing a CORA request in Basalt. So when the government is suing citizens to remove people from homes that they built and other issues like doing a CORA, I think we should be concerned. Now, he submitted this to the Supreme Court of the United States yesterday. And you only have to go to the second page. The big joke is that lawyers are paid liars. But this is significant. On the second page, he says, Mulcahy did not raise any constitutional claims in the state courts, and none were decided there. So don't take my word for it, but I will assure you, Rachel, I raised constitutional claims in every brief that I submitted, major brief that I submitted next door. But this is, and this is from the judge. You guys know Judge Selden. He was assistant county attorney for here many, many years. But this is on his ruling from June 3rd of 2016, and I quote, Mulcahy next argues that APSHA's procedure raises constitutional questions. Do you see the dilemma that we're in? You have an attorney that was investigated by none other than the Colorado Supreme Court for dishonesty. And he submitted something to the United States Supreme Court that is a falsehood. And it's not my word, it's Judge Selden's. I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you. Are there any other members of the public wishing to speak on items that are not on today's agenda? Seeing none, I will bring it back to the board. Any board comments? Rachel, please.
Yeah, thank you. This is our first regular meeting since the elections, and so I wanted to take the opportunity to congratulate you, Patty, on your re-election, and it's a compliment to your service, and very strongly to George and the leadership of RAFTA, who passed the RAFTA funding. It was quite a challenge, and it was well done, and really matched the polling results from early on. The support was there, and so really appreciate your leadership and true courage in taking that one out. I'd like to thank all the voters of Pickens County and the Valley for supporting RAFTA, and particularly supporting the Healthy Community Fund, the renewal. all those who donated or knocked on doors or wrote letters. It really made a difference, and we're looking forward in many ways to a new leadership at the State House, and I think there might be some real opportunities for the type of public land protection and values that we've always held dear in Picken County. So just wanted to congratulate everyone for that great turnout. You know, that was pretty stunning as well here. We joined the whole wave of participation across the country. So thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
And I'll just add to that, too. We want to commend Joe DeSalvo, who was also reelected, Janice Vascadil to our clerk's office, Deb Spainberger, who is going to be our new assessor, and Kelly McNicholas Curry, who will be filling Rachel's seat.
Yeah, there we go.
And we are going to have to keep tabs on Rachel because we don't want her to go too far.
Thank you.
She's done such amazing service to this community. So are there any other board comments? And I do want to thank the public for the vote, turning out the vote. For the people who went door-to-door for 1A. I know Rachel did a lot of door-to-door, as I did for 1A. And I think we're all really ready to take a deep breath and move on past this election. So
right.
If only Florida could follow suit, we'd all be happy. Any other comments, Steve?
Yeah. I had the privilege of going to the production of Big River the other night at the District Theater, put on by the Aspen Community Theater, and it is a fantastic production. The sets, the costumes, the singing, the acting is all really enjoyable, and they just did an awesome job. So I would urge everybody in the community to go to that if you're able to. I think there's 3 more productions this coming weekend, or I believe, and I can't remember beyond that, but check out at I think at the Wheeler Opera House you can get your tickets there.
And I think this is our last meeting before Thanksgiving as well. So
that's right.
Wish everyone safe travels and a great Thanksgiving.
Yeah, have a good Thanksgiving and enjoy that snow on Saturday. My son-in-law is up there right now, still blowing snow for you guys. So,
Yeah.
Greg or George, any comments? I'm good. Okay, we're going to move on to our agenda. First item on our agenda is an ordinance repealing and reenacting Title VI Health and Safety Section 6.16 Commercial Waste Haulers of the Picken County Code. Hi, please give your name for the public record.
Hi, Kathy Hall, Solid Waste Manager. I just have a presentation, hopefully. What's going on here? Oh. Okay, so I'm here also, our consultant that worked on the waste and recycling ordinance with us, Lori Batchelder Adams. She is here as well. We need questions from her. Okay. So we are bringing forward the new revised, updated waste and recycling ordinance. The current ordinance was done in 1991, so a lot has changed in the solid waste management field. So this is a first reading, I believe. There's a second reading on December 5th. We'll move forward with that.
And just of note is that this was noticed as first reading and public hearing.
Yes.
Generally, we do our public hearings on second reading. So if there's anyone today from the public, I will open the public hearing today and again on the 5th.
Okay. So what the county's waste management goals in doing this waste and recycling ordinance is to reduce the reliance on the Picken County landfill and increase recycling. Our whole goal is to increase diversion and stop filling so much waste. Create consistency with collection practices and standards throughout the Roaring Fork Valley, and obtain information necessary to assess waste diversion opportunities and successes. Data collection, essentially. The county waste diversion study identified updating the ordinance as a means of creating recycling incentives, and this the waste study was finalized in the spring of 2017. The advisory committee we put together included Picken County, City of Aspen, Basalt, and Snowmass Village, and then Carbondale added on a little bit later.
I'm looking at a blank screen below here going, wait a minute, something's missing.
I was like, what's going on? Carbondale joined on later, and they've made some good progress too. So we're seeing a lot of changes up and down the valley with streamlining the ordinance. Carbondale just adopted a single hauler, which they'll have one single hauler in town, and they're matching pretty similar what Picken County's doing on the Save As You Throw. Every hauler provided suggestions. We had multiple meetings with haulers, one-on-one and in groups, and as well as continually getting comments. I just talked to a hauler yesterday, and they had some questions, and we clarified some comments. So they've been very involved and very effective in helping us pull this all together in their comments. And then we also did a public outreach process. The public outreach process consisted of individual waste hauler meetings in April of 2018, and then we met with a group waste haulers, a group of them, in May of 2018. We held 2 public meetings, July 19th at the Pickens County Library, and then again on August 27th at Basalt Town Hall. We didn't get any members of the public to attend. We didn't get any comments. We also opened up the Pickens County Connect portal. We got 1 comment in favor of it. But through those 2 public outreach process meetings, the haulers were in attendance and also provided, again, comments, and we had good discussion. And we've also met with the BOCC 4 times, beginning in April 2017 and most recently in September 11th on 2018. So we've had a very healthy public comment and outreach process. So who's impacted and what are the changes coming? We'll review. So the original hauler ordinance really only impacted the haulers. It was really a hauler kind of licensing sort of direction to the haulers. This now includes haulers and subscribers. Haulers in the original ordinance they just had to offer recycling to customers. This ordinance requires recycling be included as part of their trash service. There's been, we're changing over to a save-as-you-throw variable rate pricing. This is the multiple container sizes. The smaller your trash container, the more you recycle, the less you'll pay. Reporting, haulers have always been required to do reporting. It wasn't enforced. It wasn't very clear. We will have some more standard or strict guidelines on what they need to report. Public responsibilities, no illegal dumping, that stays the same. Exemptions, self-haulers. Some more exemptions in the new proposed ordinance, self-haulers, non-curbside subscribers. These are what we call boutique hauling services. These are where they keep the trash in containers in their garage, and these smaller haulers will go up and actually retrieve it out of their enclosures or garages. They're not putting it on the curb. And then we'll also offer temporary 12-month waivers if there's space restrictions, access issues, and other issues. So you have the opportunity to apply for a waiver and exemption.
Kathy,
yes.
Let me ask on the last bullet point.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it does take people some time to have the right enclosure or pad built or things like that. But are we... is there a bear-proof provision that goes along with that, or some consideration so that if people are making a new area for these items that we're not creating a new attraction for bears?
Correct, and that follows the county's wildlife ordinance, which I believe was done in 2006, 2008. It's probably in need of updating, but the waste and recycling ordinance refers to the wildlife ordinance to meet those standards.
Okay, and then is it replicated in there so that people don't have to try to find it in a different code book, or maybe we should, for second reading, attach it as an appendix?
Yeah, we can attach
That's a
that.
good idea, because it is referenced in here, so.
Yeah.
Let's make it easy to find.
Yeah. And then we make sure when we update this too. George?
So, Kathy, so on the exemptions, you show there's a temporary 12-month, but that's just a temporary. It's not a. So my question is, there's a challenge on this specifically for the upper frying pan. Mm-hmm. So how are we going to address that?
So if they feel that they can't comply with these new ordinance, the haulers, there's space access, they can't put a recycle container in, a secured bear-proof type of enclosure. If it's the winter and a separate recycling truck can't make it to that, then they need to apply to the county manager or designee their call for an exemption, and then we will review their claim and then make that determination.
Yeah, because I don't think they could even have regular haulers that will even go up there. That's a problem.
Mm-hmm. And it is included. If they say we just can't get a hauler up here, then they can make that argument.
I don't think we want them sometimes to go up there, so.
Yeah, okay, great.
Yeah.
Good point, George.
So save as you throw, or variable rate, pay as you throw, you may have heard. It's a utility-based pricing. The amount of trash determines your overall costs. Your monthly costs will be lower with less trash service and more recycling. So there's 3 size containers, a 96-gallon, 64, and 32. All of the haulers will be required to offer each one of these 3 sizes of containers, and then recycling along with it. So if you are a household that recycles and composts, you can get away with a 32-gallon container. You'll save money. If you determine you start out with, we're giving the option that they can switch out a container within the first 6 months. You can switch out your container, like, oh, I'm with 96-gallon container, but boy, I really think I can go to a 64. Customers will have that option to switch out that container. Again, service also is including recycling. We are allowing the haulers to show that on the bill. So we're kind of really trying to get into people's heads that recycling isn't free, and that there is a cost associated with it. So the haulers generally were in favor of being able to show, hey, this is how much your recycling costs and this is how much your trash. It does add a little bit of complexity. There's subscriber choices and hauler service. So we'll have a period of education and get into that.
Kathy, I think you said before, but just so it doesn't go over everyone's heads, this is parallel to the ordinance the city of Aspen already has in place and how their haulers treat trash and billing and everything else.
Exactly. So we're pretty much aligning with City of Aspen. Liz Chapman's here with the City of Aspen. City of Aspen's also making note, and they want some changes now as well to their ordinance to really kind of get us all in sync. Carbondale is putting something in similar. Basalt will likely go that route as well. They're waiting to kind of see us how we get this through and how it's accepted. So they'll probably join in as well. I've already talked about the public outreach. The big important piece of this, because it's going to be a little bit more complex and some changes to some customers. We're going to do a pretty robust public education campaign, and part of that will be developing educational materials for the haulers so they can send out to their customers. The haulers requested that there's a unified message coming from the county of what is going on and what is going to be changing and what the haulers will be offering. We're also going to do next year, you'll see a lot on an education campaign to residences and businesses. How can you reduce your waste? How can I get to that smaller container? That we think is an important part. Because people are like, I need the 96-gallon. Well, maybe you don't. Maybe you can, reduce that by composting and recycling and just seeing everything we offer here at the Pickens County Solid Waste Center. We will be setting up a hotline, phone and or email that residents can call us or email us with questions about the changes. So the haulers really wanted that as well, a number for the county that they can call and get their questions answered. And it's important when you're kind of changing services and changing things, people want a place to go to get direct answers from the county who implemented this. And then an online portal for hauler registration and reporting. Previously, it's done by paper. They have to print it out, fill it out. So we're hoping to set up through our website online. They can pay because there are hauler fees associated. If you're a hauler in Pickens County, you do have to register. And it's depending on how many trucks and containers you have, where you fall into the 3 categories of a hauler. And they'll be able to pay online as well. And that is the gist of it. So questions or comments?
Greg?
Kathy, thank you for this. It's great to see this. Just regarding a couple things on the education campaign, it occurs to me the only time I think about trash is when I'm taking it out.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering if the bins can be marked with some of this educational materials. You could mark a large bin with where the smaller bins would have fit. So if they notice that they're using less trash, it may help them. Just just trying to think of a way to inspire somebody to pay attention while they're actually, engaged.
Okay.
So just wanted to suggest that. But also, I assume the bins are they're standardized, and are they being provided to the haulers, or the haulers get them separately from one location? And where do these bins come from?
There's a number of bin distributors, so it's up to the hauler who they want to purchase them from. And if because they own the bins essentially and lease them or rent them or give them to their customers, so it'll be up to them how they want to mark them, but we can offer it.
Maybe we could offer a sticker that could be put on the lid or something just to encourage them to, if they're not using it all, maybe go down a size.
Yeah.
Steve?
About 20 years ago, when I was teaching at the community school, we had Steve Smith and Heather McGregor come into our classroom. Heather works at Clear now.
Okay.
At the time, she was a reporter for the Glenwood Post-Independent, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted to see how little trash they could produce in a whole year. And so they brought in one trash bag with their entire year's worth of trash. They didn't need more than one standard trash bag size. And they recycled everything they could. They reused what they could. They changed their buying habits. So if there was something that had a lot of packaging that was not recyclable, they just wouldn't buy it. And so they brought into their classroom their entire year's worth of stuff that was having to go to the landfill to be buried. And that, I was astonished that two people could have produced that little amount of trash. And that was in the days when there weren't as many opportunities for recycling things. So they had to be pretty careful about it. And it was a really good lesson for all of the students and for the teachers also.
Our consumer behavior plays a lot into our trash, so, yeah.
Rachel, and then Greg?
You want to go first?
No, I did want to ask you just examples from elsewhere. We're not inventing something here. I'd love to hear who else is doing it other than the city, and do we have a success rate? Do we know this is workable? Are there any unforeseen consequences, onerous, problems? How much more difficult is this going to be for the homeowner, and how much more attention do we need to be paying? How much more expense will be borne? I think that's important to put that out there.
Okay, can I call up Lori Batchelder, Adam?
please.
She has lots of good data on that.
Great.
Sure. Happy to.
Hi, Lori.
Hi. Good afternoon. Our experience with the Save As You Throw, Save As You Recycle program, if that's what you're speaking to, that's probably the most complex piece. Some 7,500 communities across the United States have done this. In the Roaring Fork Valley, of course, we know Aspen has preceded us. Carbondale's going there, and Basalt has been kind of getting their toe in the water as well. And across Colorado, we have a couple of dozen communities. So in general, the experience is, first few months, little messy. There's a lot going on. People are trying to understand, getting messages out, trying to be consistent, changing containers, all of that. Also, to be perfectly honest, in many communities, in the first few months, they have sometimes seen a small flurry of illegal dumping, as people say, to heck with this, I know what I'm going to do. But very consistently in these programs, it is a quick rebellion, if you will. And in a very short time period, that reverses. The number of polls have been done around the country and even here in Colorado where the public says, gosh, now in retrospect, we're much happier with this system. Illegal dumping isn't an issue. The haulers get on board and everybody kind of works it out. So no pulling no punches. It'll be a kind of a chaotic first few months. But in the long run, the outcome and the potential for improvement is far outweighs all
Great.
of that.
Thank you.
Rachel.
Great, thank you. I was just going to say I'm really happy to see this coming forward. We have been talking about it for a couple of years now, if not longer. And I just wanted to kind of emphasize a few things. There is a larger context to all of this, and that is the life of our landfill. And that is something that we are looking for expansion possibilities. We're in permitting for that. But even with that, at one day, it all comes to an end. And where our community would send its true garbage, I just don't know. It would be a big question and a big expense for all of us. It's something other communities face. But the landfill is an enterprise fund. That means it's not supported by any of your property tax dollars or any sales tax dollars. It is strictly based on run as a business. And recycling no longer has a profit center in it, so we put it that way. The markets have changed. You really can't make any money off of anything. There's no real recycling centers near us that can make a profit off that. We have to pay to ship everything down to Denver and then have it further processed there. So this is not a feel-good measure. This is about dollars and cents. This is about protection and life of a community asset. And going back to the basics, that it's not just, it's reduce, reuse, recycle. And we all get a little hung up on the recycle part and forget how important the reducing and the reusing part are. So I really just wanted to talk a moment about that there are other drivers to this. It's not that county wants to feel good about recycling. It's about this is the only way we can continue a recycling program. I think the cost, I don't have the numbers in front of me of running the Rio Grande, somewhere around $200,000 a year loss. To recycle those materials that are deposited there, and other centers have similar. So this is shifting it back to the public in some ways, but it is a shared public responsibility to manage our waste well. So thank you very much for this. I'm in full support.
George.
Maybe you mentioned this, but when will this actually begin, this program? When will it be enacted? Because I know we've talked 6 months, we talked a year, and...
So the second reading is December 5th. Correct me, Jen, if I'm wrong. And then I think there's a 30-day period after final. So mid-January, I think it takes effect. We talked to the haulers. We're giving them 6 months to get their customers on board and educated and get people containers delivered and ordered and such. So about July, we should be in full swing.
Oh, okay.
July 2019. Yeah.
And we'll probably, because if this passes, which I suspect it will, that will then lead to a follow-up conversation with the city regarding the Rio Grande Recycling Center and also BOCC or with the Mid-Valley, depending on what BOCC decides to do.
Yeah.
Because we're currently subsidizing that center along with the town of BOCC.
Correct.
And the Redstone pickup, too.
Correct. So Redstone will be phased out within the first half of next year as the hauler up there. The haulers, there's a couple that service that area. They will also, in Pickens County, Redstone will have curbside recycling as part of this. So that Redstone Center will be phased out. We've had discussions with BOCC about the Waste Management Willits Transfer Station Public Drop-Off Center, phasing that out as well sometime 2019, early 2020.
Yeah, so I guess maybe later next year, I suggest that staff go out to the caucuses, certainly the Frying Pan in June and Redstone prior to that, to provide this information so they're not sort of surprised, which I'm sure some people are always surprised because they don't see or read.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and as far as the Willits Recycling Center, because that's not solely used by Pickens County, residents who will be having this curbside recycling. I think we definitely need to keep an eye on that because, after the closure of the one in Glenwood Springs, people now on their way to work drop off their stuff at Willits. So we want to make sure that we have to look at this valley-wide, even outside of Pickens County, and see what we can do because we don't want to see people not recycling valley-wide. So I think we just need to keep an eye on that too and the use there. But Rachel did bring up the question about bears and the wildlife ordinance, but mainly for the bigger container, the shelters. Will these smaller, these little blue examples that you had, are those bear resistant? Do they have a wire latch or something on the top?
So our wildlife ordinance is kind of vague on that. Aspen's is much more, they prescribe to it's an International Council on Bear Safety and Containering. I can't remember the name of it currently, but ours just says it has to be a latching container that closes. There is provisions in the ordinance that if the container, you can't latch it, the smaller containers, I think they have trouble finding the smaller containers, but they'll make it happen.
Yeah.
But if you're not latching your container and leaving it open,
Because your
there's
example,
so
your
much trash
pictures here
in
have
there.
trash bubbling out the top
yeah, the haulers have the right to charge you that
for overflow.
for an overflow. So yeah.
Right.
So
I'm
they
just
need
concerned about people, especially in the rural areas, taking their trash out in the morning before they go to work, which is allowed for pickup. And then the bears know when you're going to work.
Oh yeah.
You know, they know when you're putting out your garbage. So I think we're going to have to really keep an eye on that because I'm afraid that just the odors of just even recyclables. We're gonna we did a good job this summer. We didn't have a lot of bear activity because also there was food up in the mountains for them, but up in the forest. So I think that's something we may want to.
I mean, I agree with you, and it's something to watch with all these implementation components,
Yeah.
but people are already putting their trash out in the morning before they go to work. It's just not sorted.
Yeah, but they're in different
There'll be more
containers right
containers
now.
and things
These
now.
are different containers than what they have now. Right now, we require bear-resistant containers. These technically are a little different, so we might want to
Yeah, I
look
agree with you
into
in
that.
general. That's why I
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. This, I did say I was going to, Greg, and then I do want to open it for public comment if there's anyone here because of the way it was noticed.
I'm just looking at item F, the recyclables contamination. And it says that if there's 25% contamination of other non-recyclables within the recyclables, it can be considered trash by the haul. I'd love to know, is there any willful contamination, so to speak, to make things easier for people? Does that occur? Is this an issue? You can imagine it's probably pretty hard to get to a purely recyclable container. So there's already, I don't know what the tolerance for contamination is, but I'm just wondering how often will recyclables get tossed by the hauler if there happens to be the wrong piece of plastic or trash mixed in with it.
We don't have good data on it right now. We did during our 2015 waste study. We had about 8% contamination. People here are pretty good. I think probably where you see a lot of issues of contaminated recycling is in the tourist sector of the community, where they just don't know or it's not clear. So through the reporting process, we're hoping the haulers will be able to report how many reloads they had to reject or recycling. And a lot of communities have tags, and that's something we can do as part of our education campaign with the haulers. Hey, I didn't pick up your recycling today because it was contaminated. A lot of communities do that, and it's just an education piece and it'll be up to the haulers. Do they want to pick and clean out the recycling? Most don't. But then they can just know, residents and businesses can learn the next time that, styrofoam doesn't belong. A lot of times they just don't know.
I'm wondering to follow up on that. Is that in my neighborhood? I know a lot of the housekeepers seem to be the ones taking the trash down. I'm not certain that they're all paying attention or reading anything that's written, or if they can speak the language. So one is it bilingual, and secondly, is there any way we can? It'd be great to have a sign that was addressed right to the people who are actually taking the trash out. If housekeepers or something, because often they don't seem to be connected to the community, the immediate neighborhood. They'll come down and just toss it and be on their way. It's the last thing they do before they head off. And so I'm wondering if there's a way we can address that in a sensitive way that make sure that everybody's paying attention.
It's notices to go out to property managers. That would be helpful.
Property managers, housekeepers.
Because a lot of the property managers have big housekeeping crews.
And we're going to up because recycling is confusing. So part of the education campaign is really try and clarify what can and can't go in, what is single stream, very graphical kind of design.
So if this is quote unquote kind of mandatory curbside recycling pickup, what do we do for people who just throw their recycling in the trash? Remember the cities that said it's against the law if you don't recycle, but they don't really. I mean, I look in my dumpsters and boy, we'd have a lot of people going to jail.
We are not going to that level of enforcement. Yet.
I did notice a jail sentence in here though.
Yeah. You're paying for it, whether you use it or not right now. It's up to the resident. Eventually, maybe if we're really seeing a problem with and we can't get people, New Jersey, East Coast cities are big on the enforcement. They'll go around, check your container, and you get a fine. We're not ready to go there yet, but.
I do have a question. On page 19 of our packet, under violations and penalties, under B, the very first, there is no jail, but there is one underneath the second one, and may be punishable by 90 days in county jail. Why are we doing it for one? I mean, I always said that about the bear ordinance myself. People get 1, 2, 3 strikes and the bear's killed. Not saying that we should
Kill the hauler.
yeah, but maybe sometimes rather than just having the person pay the fee, we needed to be, and it wasn't for the property manager, it was for the owner of the property who should take responsibility.
And this is addressing the hauler.
Okay.
Yeah.
The second one or both? Both?
Just the second.
Okay, so the first one, you can violate as many times as you want, pay $1,000 every time, with no further punishment?
That's as far as we can go.
Okay, that's all I needed to know.
We checked with the attorneys on this. So.
John, you told me I could do whatever I wanted.
So Patty, this is not Alice's restaurant where he went to jail because of trash.
But you can if you're the hauler, and you can if under bear ordinance, I believe. The third time with the bear ordinance came.
I just have a question about, say we collect a lot of these fines, where does the money go, and will it be used to separate the trash? We're trying to solve a problem here with recycling. Is the money received from the scofflaws going to go towards solving the problem, or does it go into the treasury for other purposes?
It's our regulation, the fine comes to the county.
We could determine a special fund for that and use it for education or
I don't think
separating
we have
recyclables.
fined anyone on anything on trash in quite a while. And so let's move on with this and settle it as a board where they'd like to see it. But I agree with what you're saying. We'll keep track of it.
The bear ordinance defines the money goes into a fund that pays for trash cans for people who can't afford bear-resistant trash cans.
Correct. Very few.
There's a
fines are
nexus there.
collected.
If I could just suggest, that would be, I think, an appropriation decision of the board. And so you can pass this regulation to create, the regulation, and then we could talk during budget about would you like to segregate any funds collected under it and for what purpose. But I think that'd fall under your appropriation authority as a board.
Right. Okay. Down the road.
Okay, this was noticed as a public hearing on first reading. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on this item on our agenda? Seeing none. Jeanette, do I close it for the first reading and reopen it again on the second, or just let it roll? Close it. I'm going to close the public hearing on first read. We will have a public hearing again on the second read. Bringing it back to the board. Steve.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the ordinance of the Board of County Commissioners of Pickens County repealing and reenacting Title VI Health and Safety, Section 6.16, Commercial Waste Haulers of the Pickens County Code.
Very good.
I'll second
A
that.
lot of words.
I have a motion. I have a second. Further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Thank you. Thanks, Laura. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for
All
coming.
right,
Thank
next
you.
item on our agenda is an ordinance authorizing acceptance of the Stranahan donation of the east half of the Argenta and Yankee mining claims. This is a first reading set for public hearing on December the 5th. Hi, would you please give your name for the public record?
Hello, I am Dale Will, the Acquisition Director for Pickens County Open Space and Trails. And I have a map on my little flash drive if I can figure out how to get it to go. I'm joined here today by Jim Curtis, who has been working with George Stranahan for years on these things and has helped me understand some of the history. And this is a journey that really began 40 years ago. George decided to try to protect Upper Lanedo. And in 1978, the state of Colorado had just enacted a statute that authorized the conveyance of conservation easements in our state. And the very first conservation easement granted under that new statute is the one that is on the property that's contiguous to the piece that we're discussing today. And over the years, let's see if I can figure out how to drag this. John, how do I click and drag? Oh, there we go. Takes 2 fingers. So here's Upper Lanedo, and the properties that are outlined in yellow are properties on which conservation easements were granted. The subject of the ordinance today is this one right by this little hand, the Stranahan donation parcel, but you can see that in this area much land has been conserved. There are only a couple of parcels up that could or do have cabins on them, these 2 here, and the rest of Upper Lanedo has all been protected from residential development. Pitkin County has succeeded in fully protecting a few little valleys, one being Hunter Creek and another being Avalanche Creek. Upper Lanedo is largely protected from residential development, and the only development that can occur on what's left is under the rural and remote zoning, so it's fairly benign. But George Stranahan had a lot to do with this, and since 1978 has been donating conservation easements and parcels through Aspen Valley Land Trust with the conservation easements. The parcels have come to Pitkin County, and some of this has also been done with TDRs. This is the last of Mr. Stranahan's properties in this large area. Everyone that's been up there knows it's a stunning place, Upper Lanedo, with its big aspen groves and vistas of the Elk Range and the Bells and Pyramid and all of that. The parcel in question is 10 acres that was the last thing George had kept until 10 years ago. It had a cabin on it, and it's this property that's highlighted in red here. It sits right at Rocky Fork. I was fortunate to walk in there this fall during the peak of the colors with Jim and with other open space staff to take a look at this. The Open Space Board had said, sure, we think we ought to accept the donation, but they wanted staff to go see if there were any tailing piles or any liabilities of any kind. And it was the best day on the job this year, I can guarantee you, walking in there and finding nothing but essentially wilderness. We did, using an old photograph, locate the site where the cabin once stood. The cabin was removed about 10 years ago, and a TDR was pulled off of this property, and now Mr. Stranahan wants to give the carcass, as we sometimes say, to Pitkin County, and the Open Space Program has a backcountry parcel management plan already in effect that essentially says that we will manage our backcountry parcels consistent with the management of surrounding federal lands. Hence, if there's hunting or other activities going on the surrounding federal lands, we're not going to go up there and try to impose special use limitations on these backcountry parcels. They're tricky to get to. This one's pretty much an all-day out and back when there's no snow on the ground. So the Open Space Program can certainly adopt this property with negligible impact on our budgeting and so forth. We are very grateful that Mr. Stranahan wants to donate this to us to complete his 40 years of conservation efforts in this area. The Open Space Board has unanimously recommended that you accept this gift, and
The question.
forward to you.
So no mine tailings, no mine waste, no shafts
Correct.
that were obvious.
I can't claim that I covered every square foot of it, but we got a
And
pretty
you guys
solid
spent a
look
great
at
deal
it.
of time up there that day. Is Rocky Fork Road, is that drivable?
It would be if it weren't gated, but when we got up well, within a couple of miles of it, that we found the Forest Service had gated it. So the gate is up around here, up on basically the top of the ridge. And I am not fluent with a forest management, travel management plan and
To know if that's
what
why
their
it's
ideas
gated.
are there, but I assume they're keeping the road available for firefighting and that kind of thing, but didn't show any evidence
So
of.
access would technically be on foot from a certain point.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, any other, Steve?
It looks like on the map that this will be called open space land, but in the thing it just says he's giving it to Picken County. And I'm just curious of where the title will be held. Will it be held by Open Space and Trails, or is it a county general land parcel that we have parcels around the county that belong to us and don't belong to the Open Space and Trails?
There's actually no difference. All Pitkin County open space is held, the title is held by the Board of County Commissioners of Pitkin County. So the designation as open space for a gift like this is really an administrative designation that authorizes the expenditure of the open space fund for purposes of stewardship. But none of the title of any county open space will you see any special demarcation of it being open space property. There is a legal distinction for properties that are acquired through expenditures of the open space fund, and those fall under restrictions of conversion in the charter. This property does have an existing covenant on it from the TDR program that would prohibit development by anyone. So to that extent, it has a added layer of legal protection, but it's all held by the five of you. So.
I would like to have a site visit to this location sometime. So maybe next summer. Maybe next summer we can all go up there and have a hike and a picnic.
It was a tough hike, though, from what I hear.
Oh, it was a long hike. It wasn't tough. It was on a road, but it took a while.
Well, and it says at no cost, but we will cover closing fees, et cetera, that kind of cost?
Well, I don't know what
Transactional
transaction costs there would be. We're not anticipating any, but John, once the ordinance is adopted, we'll have to manage the actual transfer and whether or not any kind of due diligence is called for. But this has been through the county's due diligence screen once in the conveyance of the TDR.
Right.
So.
Perfect. Rachel?
Yeah, well, I'd just like to thank you, Dale, for your work on this, and Jim, the representative of Mr. Stranahan, and Mr. Stranahan. I think this is really valuable. I want to move it forward, and it does remind me of something I've kind of asked several times for open space and trails, and for that matter, I think more county departments to consider, and that is creating some sort of certificate of appreciation that we can frame and give to people. I think the last time I talked about it, it was when we were donated a fishing easement. But I think that we really should commemorate more than a thanks in this meeting and give people something substantial afterwards. So I'd really like to see that created by your department and then go backwards to some of these great donations and send them a thank you framed certificate. It's just
especially if you took
simple.
A picture.
And we should start doing that. So
is that the will of the
Yeah, I think
board?
that's a great idea.
Yeah, I think we need to.
Okay, well, I will have it ready at second reading.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Craig?
Yeah.
And I was going to echo what Rachel said. I think George has done so much along these lines that there ought to be something named after him up there. Is there a park? Is there a...
There's a whiskey.
There's a whiskey named after him. What more would anybody want?
That's probably the ultimate, honor. I wanted to ask, so anyway, thank you, and Jim as well. This is important, good stuff you're doing, and it's really great that George has done this, and here on honoring him for this. I wanted to ask, clearly looking at the map, this is logging area. You can see the old logging roads. I'm wondering how long ago was it logged? How are we looking for health of the forest in there? Will we ever do fire mitigation in there? You know, I'm just wondering what is possible and how should this be managed going forward? As we're acquiring property like this, some responsibility comes with it, and I'd love to hear about that.
Well, that's an excellent question, and during the hike, it was obvious that we were looking at second growth trees. They're pretty closely spaced, not only on the parcels that now belong to Pitkin County, but more importantly on the larger area of surrounding federal lands. So I would imagine a lot of the timber for the original settlement of this valley must have come out of that area, because it was obvious that wide swaths of this had been logged. As far as forest management, that's not my expertise. We do have this backcountry management plan, and we have over time cooperated with the Forest Service and other federal agencies on joint management programs. For example, the Smuggler Hunter Cooperative does have quite a bit of forest management built into it with pine beetle mitigation, and some of you may recall the helicopter logging that went on with some of the beetle kill, as well as the mastication of some oak up on the WUI, the rural-urban interface on the face of Smuggler. Certainly, Upper Lanedo could be similarly subject to that kind of joint planning, and I'm not answering your question specifically, but what my suggestion would be to include that in the county's ongoing conversation with the Forest Service about management of this larger area, since to be effective, we would want to manage these Upper Lanedo parcels consistent with the way the Forest Service is approaching the larger area.
Sure, and recognizing that there's a carbon sink value to it that's calculable and might be worth noting, but yeah, also once again, just George's legacy, is rooted in all these amazing parcels that he's put back into the public trust, so to speak.
Yep.
Any other questions from the board? So, can I get a motion, please?
Motion to accept.
Okay, a motion to approve the authorization of acceptance of Stranahan
Second.
donation. I have a motion. I have a second. Any further comment?
Make sure we got that right.
Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Again, second reading, public comment on the 5th of December. Thank you.
Thank you.
Patty, just on behalf of George.
You need to come
Come
up
on
to
a microphone.
Tim, come up to a mic,
It will
please.
just be one sentence.
You got to be
That's okay.
official.
Jim Curtis on behalf of George. I will clearly pass along all of the comments, and I know he's very appreciative. And the one thing I would like to say, I think I've been dealing with this for over 10 years, and it's been a very cooperative, positive relationship with Dale and the county and the open space people, and it just kind of shows maybe on a national basis, if you tend to cooperate, you can get things done. So hopefully
you.
everybody's appreciative of that.
Thanks.
And I know George is. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Jim.
All right, the next item on our agenda is a resolution approving a grant agreement with the Colorado Department of Transportation Aeronautical Board Division of Aeronautics for runway design Phase 1. Hello, gentlemen. Would you please give your names for the public record?
My name is Chris Padilla. I'm the airport controller.
Rich Engelhardt, COO and the owner's rep on this project.
All right, the floor is yours.
So today we are bringing forth a CDOT grant for $150,000. It is based off of the FAA FONSI that we received earlier this summer, and the counterpart to that on the federal level is we received an FAA grant for $6 million. Today we're looking for the board to approve the resolution, and on the first reading, and set for the second reading, public hearing on December 5th.
Okay, I'm
Questions?
sure you're going to have questions from the board on this
Well,
one.
actually, no. We like to get those grants, and there is, the first reading is today, so I would make a motion to approve on first reading. Resolution approving a grant agreement with the Colorado Department of Transportation Aeronautical Board.
I'll second.
You have a comment?
Yeah, question. So this is a state matching fund, as you said, as part of the FAA grant. So did we have to put in any dollars as a match as well? And if so, how much?
We did. From the airport, we put in $517,653.
Correct.
Which is 7.75% of the overall grant that was received.
Yeah, normally the state tries to match 5% or 150 if they can't match the 5%.
Great, thank you.
So I have a question. It does say under budgetary impact that the FAA federal funding is $6 million plus. So what is that $6 million actually dedicated to do? Are we already doing, is it just the design of a runway that we have not yet approved?
Now, what it is set up to do is, it's called the Phase 1 services that were included in the grant application. It's for runway program management, public involvement,
Right.
the process that the board's going through
We're
right now.
going through right now.
Right, looking at the financial planning and feasibility, and then initial design for what would be called the required runway. But the required runway will be decided through the public process that we're going through now.
Okay, so I'm just, because, you know, the dollar amount is large for a plan. I just want the public to be well aware that the Board of County Commissioners has not made any decisions as far as proceeding with a runway or a new terminal at this point. We are starting in on a very extensive, probably 18-plus month public input process with 4 committees that we are creating now. And what is the website for people to go to for that?
ASEvision.com.
ASEvision.com. ASEvision.com for anybody interested in becoming part of our planning process moving forward. 4 different, very set. It's going to be fun. Yeah, for the next 18-plus months. So I just want to make sure we get that information out there. Steve?
Chris, for the public's benefit, could you tell where this funding from the CDOT comes from, how they raise that money? Because isn't CDOT like always short on funding for fixing our roads?
Yeah, so they...
I know the answer, but I want
But not for fixing your
more
airport.
education for the public.
So you're gonna have to kind of stretch my memory on this one. So CDOT has different divisions. This division is through the aeronautical division. It'll get through different taxes for airline fuels, AVTAX, different taxes based on travelers, and I'm trying to remember, and some federal appropriations that they get.
None of them are tax dollars that would otherwise be used for roads.
Yeah,
in
none
other
of them are
words.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I didn't realize that was what you're trying to
That's
get
the
to.
important.
Okay, yeah.
for the,
these
for
were,
the public to understand.
Yeah,
this money that they have for the aeronautics is specifically for use at airports only.
Correct.
Okay.
So you can't drive your car on the runway at the end of the day.
Well, maybe we can have one day when we all
Structurally you can, but
like we
not
did before.
legally.
I think Greg has a comment, and then
I just want to. Are there any other? Talks about the scope of services and conditions as spelled out in the grant. Is there anything else regarding the conditions of this that we need to elaborate that the public should know? Just looking at the word conditions, which pops up a couple times there. What are the conditions? Is there anything else we need to hear from you about?
Well, from the finance side, we do have to follow FAA grant assurances, which are quite lengthy and would be, and I can send those out to you guys.
Yeah, I know.
So, but yeah, we do have to follow FAA grant assurances. And
there's a timeline set there. We have to use these monies in the appropriate manner.
Correct.
Right.
The expenditure date on that is 2022 by the time that the fee or the funds have to be expended, with an expiration date on the project itself of 2021. So they
I don't
set
want
it
to
out
think
there
to
a ways.
22 just yet.
So we should know as a community what we're going to be doing out there,
hope.
and then can apply those funds for that.
Got it. Just so we keep tracking what the obligation is. So if we announce to the public we haven't crossed any line, I want to make sure we haven't. We're certain of that. Thank you.
Okay, I have a motion and I have a second. Seeing no further comment, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Moving now to, this is a confirmatory reading on and public hearing on an emergency resolution supporting the grant application for local parks and outdoor recreation through Great Outdoors Colorado for the Pitkin County Healthy Rivers Whitewater Park Streamside you guys laughing over there? Streamside amenities, and if awarded, acceptance of the grant. That is a long title. So who's taking this one, gentlemen?
I'll do that.
Okay.
For Lisa, she's getting ready for I don't want to say a meeting, but
There's a book
gathering this afternoon.
tonight, 6 o'clock here. It's a author of a book related to water.
Major Powell.
It's part of the public speakers.
Put on by Healthy Rivers and Streams.
A little closer to your microphone.
You make
I don't want the grassroots.
At any
guy
rate, this
yelling
is a confirmatory reading of an emergency resolution that was done by the board at the last regular scheduled meeting. It was done as an emergency resolution in order to meet filing deadlines for GOCO. The board approved it, and the grant application has been filed. So, pursuant to the Home Rule Charter, this is a necessary step to confirm the board's previous action. It is also a public hearing.
So are there any questions to John, or may I open the public hearing? Okay, are there any members of the public wishing to speak on this item on our agenda? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the board.
I would make a motion to approve the emergency resolution supporting the grant application for a local parks and outdoor recreation grant through Great Outdoors Colorado for the Pitkin County Healthy Rivers Whitewater Park Streamside amenities.
Second.
All right, I have a motion, I have a second. Seeing no further comment, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
So, board, it is almost 1:15. Do we want to take a break now, or do you want to go through? I think we could do these continuations. We can probably do the Dreamus subdivision item and then take a break before the Castle Creek investors.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I wanted to make just a quick comment on Major Powell that popped into my head as we're discussing this. The subject of tonight's lecture is Major Powell and the Colorado River, his discoveries around the West. He was the surveyor of the Colorado River. Perhaps not the first guy to go down it, as some people think, but the thing that's famous about him is, in my mind, is that he advocated that political boundaries be put along watersheds, and that still makes a lot of sense to me.
So did Lake Powell is named after him?
Lake Powell is named after him.
See,
I wonder if what he would have thought of that.
Once they drain it, he might have a difference of opinion. Okay, we are going to move to a resolution approving the Willoughby Ponds Trust subdivision exemption for a lot line adjustment and minor plat amendment and activity envelope and site review on Lot 6. The request is to continue this item to December the 5th.
So move.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Second item.
One question, do you have to open the public hearing as we do these in case
Oh,
somebody's
do I
here?
need to? Okay, I need to open the public. Is there any members of the public wishing to comment on this item on our agenda? Seeing none, I will continue the public hearing also to December the 5th.
Thank you.
I'm going to call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Again. Second one, a resolution approving the Horseshoe Aspen Mountain LLC site plan review, continue to 12:15. This is also a public hearing. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Seeing none, I will continue the public hearing also to December the 5th.
So move.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
So the next item on our agenda is the resolution approving the Dreamus subdivision planned unit development, PUD, detailed subdivision and final plat and activity envelope and site plan review for Lot 2. This is the second reading and public hearing. Welcome. Please give your names for the public record.
Tammy, planner.
Glenn Horn.
And thank you for this packet that wasn't like the last packet, which I still have up on my desk to review.
Yeah, well, I figured the board should be familiar with this. This is the last step in the 5-step process. So, as the board should recall, they voted 4-0 on October 24th to approve this application. So this is the second reading. No new issues or comments have come in since that time. No issues were raised at that meeting. So I'm going to leave it short and brief and just leave it at that unless you guys have more questions.
So there's no changes, additions, deletions? Thank you. Does the board have any questions to add? Whoa.
Yeah.
Pretty thorough.
So, this is a public hearing. I'm going to open this item to any members of the public wishing to speak on this item on our agenda. Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. Steve?
So I'd be pleased to make a resolution to approve the Doremus subdivision PUD detailed submission and final plat and activity and site plan review for Lot 2.
Second.
I have a motion, I have a second. I'm going to make a comment. Thank you. This is a long process. We appreciate everyone's patience, and I'm sure the Doremus family looks forward to moving this on. So I'm going to call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
On behalf of Andrew and Jean, I wanted to thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, and enjoy your new home when you get it built there.
And don't forget the easement, the access down to the greenhouse. All right, we are going to take a, how many 15-minute break for grassroots. Thank you. Commissioners' regular meeting on Wednesday, November the 4th? 14th. I've got it, my mic wasn't on. This is a regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners on Wednesday, November the 14th. And we are continuing with a public hearing on a land use item, which is a resolution approving the, no, that's the last one. It is an appeal of hearing officer determination number 03/2018, granting approval and activity envelope with conditions. So please give your name for the public record.
Hey, Tammy, planner.
Can I ask, again, this is a appeal on a hearing decision, right, John?
That's correct.
And so it's, will you, again, just for everyone understanding in terms of our role here as a de novo land use application?
Sure. And
thanks, George.
Tammy has the standards and the procedure outlined in her memo. The appeal involves two different concepts, I guess. Number one, the fact that this is not a de novo, this is not a rehearing of an original application. This is merely a review of the hearing officer's action. And the exercise for the board is to determine whether or not the hearing officer abused his discretion, exceeded his authority, or committed some error in the application of code language, code standards, or criteria to the application and his decision. If the board finds that that did not happen, then that is an affirmation of the hearing officer's determination. If the board finds that any of those did happen, then the board has 4 basic options to choose from. The board can remand this action or this application back to the hearing officer for further proceeding. You can remand the action back with instructions or direction. You can overturn the decision and then, by implication, send it back to start over from the original application, or you can modify the hearing officer's determination and conclude the matter in this proceeding in front of the BOCC. So that's the process that we have in front of us. The conduct of the matter is that of a public hearing, because the original application was the nature of a public hearing. So the board can entertain public comment from any member of the public willing or wanting to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay.
All right, so I'll just start with some background on this property. The applicant is Castle Creek Investors Incorporated, represented by Jody Edwards here today, and John Miller also. The subject property, as shown, highlighted in blue on the screen, is known as the Summit Parcel. It's located, as you can see, near the intersection of Richmond Hill Road and Little Annie Road. And so the board is probably familiar with the site visit, the property that they visited last spring, I guess, and that would be, actually, I believe this rectangle right here. So just to give you some bearings. The property is crossed by Richmond Hill Road. Off of that road is a driveway accessing the activity envelope that the hearing officer approved. Let me go down to the next. So this is an image of that property. You can see Richmond Hill Road crossing through the property, and this little spur right here is an existing primitive driveway, which comes down to the southeastern side of the property. And basically where this hand is located is the activity envelope, which was approved with that hearing officer determination. It contains approximately 53 acres, is conforming in size in the rural and remote zone district. Access of this driveway, or actually, let's see, an additional property just to the north of this subject property is, let me find the address, 1640 Richmond Hill Road, and that property is accessed from this existing driveway. Other improvements on this parcel include a lunch cabin, which is the subject of this appeal, a vault privy, and a well. The applicant has a lease agreement currently with the Aspen Ski Company for use of the property for powder tours.
Tammy, how long is the lease for? Is it perpetuity? Is it renewed?
That's a good question.
The current one is for the next 5 years.
Next 5 years. Okay, thank you.
In 2001, pursuant to BOCC Resolution 110-2001, a special review, GMQS exemption 1041 hazard review and conceptual submission was approved. This approval did lapse on July 5th, 2016. The site plan depicted here, this was never recorded with the clerk and recorder. So this past spring, the applicant submitted an application requesting reapproval of the activity envelope approved in that 2001 BOCC decision. The application was forwarded to the hearing officer based on objections raised by the adjacent property owner, Larson Family LP. These concerns raised by Larson Family LP were largely in regards to the driveway and not necessarily the lunch cabin. The hearing officer did consider this application on May 15th, 2018, where he issued determination number 3, 2018, which did reapprove that activity envelope, as I discussed. Now, the applicant/appellant is appealing condition number 5 specifically in that hearing officer determination, which in summary is requiring that that lunch cabin be removed if a building permit for a single-family residence is ever built. The applicant's position, and I'll summarize it, is that there is no prohibition against 2 principal uses when one of the uses is not residential, and the code allows for the continuation of grandfathered uses and structures accessory to the grandfathered use. And so they're arguing, therefore, the continued use of the existing lunch cabin and the construction of a future residence is allowed, and the lunch cabin should not be required to be removed once a residence is built. And so John did a great job explaining the process at this point with the appeal. And so staff's position is that it hasn't changed from the original memo at the hearing officer meeting, and that is consistent also with the 2001 BOCC Resolution 110-2001, which recognizes the pre-existing powder tours use of the lunch cabin and the structure which is accessory to that use. Staff believes that Section 34020D1 does support the coexistence of that pre-existing use and a future residence. So I think, I'm not sure if you guys all received it, but the Larson Family LP did just submit a letter today, which wasn't in your packets.
I didn't receive it because I haven't had access to my
email
today.
So
it was forwarded to us little earlier this morning, right around 12.
Yeah, so it's.
We can go print copies.
Not yet, but, yeah, it's lengthy.
40 pages.
I just saw the letter 5 minutes ago. It's 40 pages
Yeah.
long, so I didn't.
Right, and staff, we haven't reviewed the letter as well.
Yeah, I haven't had an opportunity to see it, so.
Yeah.
But anyway, moving.
So, right, as John said, at this point, the BOCC must make a decision pursuant to 220-180, whether there has been a clear and demonstrable error, abuse of discretion, or denial of procedural due process in the application of the facts and the records. And so, based on the board's decision today, staff will draft a resolution that will be considered by the BOCC at the regular meeting on December 5th. So, with that, I'll take any questions.
Rachel, please.
Yeah, I was a little confused by what you just said, and I may have misunderstood. From reading the packet, it was the hearing officer's determination that there can only be one use. And I know Jody's going to make his discussions on that. And you seem to just say something different, that staff has determined that there could be a grandfathered use, and that, but that wasn't presented at the time the hearing officer was discussing that component in the testimony.
Right. It was acknowledged in staff's memo, and at the hearing, it's I think in the hearing transcripts that we did recognize the lunch cabin as a grandfathered use. It's been in existence for.
Okay, but the hearing officer kept going back to saying, no, there will only be one use on this
One
property.
principal use.
Right.
Principal use.
Right.
And so, but I didn't see staff correcting him, I guess, in the record to say, well, no, we see this as grandfathered. It didn't end up that way.
Right. We didn't have that discussion, as that was not part of the objection. And I guess that's what the board is here to decide, is whether that merit.
Right, okay. I was just
Yeah.
wondering, because, again, staff is saying that, in their opinion, it's okay.
Right, but it was ultimately the hearing
And
officers.
then, you don't have to answer this right now, but, again, from reading Jody's letter and the packet, the argument seems to turn on this phrase of a physical residence as a use versus another use that's not, primary purpose. And in those terms, I'd like to know what would be the precedent set, or the implication perhaps for other county parcels, to kind of read into the code that this is what's meant by physical residence, as opposed to, a single physical residence, a single purpose. I just want to look at the greater implications of what we're being asked to rule on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Should I go ahead and answer?
Can I just?
Sure.
Yeah, you can think about it for a little bit.
John, we have a noise coming. I don't know if it's
We can turn it off.
Okay.
Don't turn it off, John.
Turn off the mic, yeah.
Yeah, turn off the mic, Mike.
I just didn't want to make sure we were having trouble
If
with
there's
some
no
of our
red dot,
some
then
of our grassroots stuff. No, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
you're fine.
We had issues earlier with some of our systems. I wanted to make sure we weren't having bigger issues. John, you can keep breathing. It's fine.
Well, I can go.
No. I don't want you to go.
Just like a deep sea dolphin.
I'm planning on hanging around for a while.
Just as long as I'm a noise person, as long as I've identified that we're in. No, it's not. Now that I know what it is, I'm more than happy to hear it.
I'm trying to have it. It helps me
Yeah.
stay afloat.
Okay.
I do want to add, I forgot to mention that this cabin was redeveloped. It got the appropriate permits from the county in 2012 to demo the existing lunch cabin and rebuild, same footprint, same size. And so that CO was issued in 2012. So this is just an image of that cabin for you.
And it's only used by the ski company on a seasonal basis for lunch type activities.
That's
related to the powder tours.
Once upon a time, it was used in the summer residentially, but that use hasn't happened for a long time.
Thanks for the clarification. Okay, do we have any more questions of staff?
Yeah, I do have one more, and again, I may have missed it, but where on the parcel is the lunch cabin compared to the building site for the housing, the unit?
Let's see here. The existing driveway is located here. This small little square, it
Oh, I
says
see it
cabin
right
right there.
Okay.
And then the envelope is hard to make out, but it's this square down on
Down here.
this side.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you have any idea of approximate distance between the two?
Ooh.
Approximate.
Well, what's the width of a mining claim?
I mean, there should
What's
be
the
a
width of
scale.
a mining claim?
It's 300 feet, isn't it?
No, that,
270 square feet, you just said.
Do we have a scale on here?
no. She's asking the distance between the lunch cabin
And the
new
building envelope.
So here is 100, 200 feet, and a scale up here, so.
So it's about
Gotta be
200.
two to
400, 300, 400? I mean, it's hard to
Okay.
fit it all in there.
It's about this far.
Thank you.
We can blow it up and make it further.
All right, any other questions, or can we let Jody proceed? We're good?
I do have a question about, well, it really is referring to Jody's letter, so maybe I should wait till Jody does his
Okay.
presentation.
Just keep track and let me know, so I don't forget you.
I'll let you know.
All right, Jody,
Can you get me up?
Yep.
please introduce yourself for the public record.
Am I on?
You are on. If your red light's on, you kind of have to.
Yeah, okay. Okay, for the record, my name is Jody Edwards and I represent Castle Creek Investors. With me to my right is John Miller, as most all of you know, president and majority shareholder of Castle Creek Investors. Over here, I'm sorry, I can swivel, is Emily Closer, who is the secretary and a shareholder of Castle Creek Investors, as well as John's daughter. And behind me are David Clark and Rich Berkeley, both of whom I think most of you know, with the Aspen Ski Company. David is an attorney, and Rich, he ran operations for 25 years and now senior VP of strategy and planning. So I want to first start with a little bit of history. Well, let me orient you on this little, here's where we are somewhere down here in Aspen. Here's the ski area, and we're talking about this parcel back here, along Richmond Hill, or Richmond Ridge to the back, behind Aspen Mountain. So in 1969, they began having powder tours in the back area and behind Aspen Mountain, and those powder tours have run every year since then. There were originally two separate companies with Forest Service permits, the Aspen Club Lodge, which I think most of you would know is run by, or at that time was run by Dick Butera, and then something called Deep Powder Inc., which as far as we can tell was run by Steve Crockett. The ski company bought both of those eventually and has continued the operations. The powder tours are mostly on Forest Service lands and also on CCI or Castle Creek investor lands. John has a lease with the ski company for that, for John's lands, and the ski company has a permit with the Forest Service for those lands. In 1979, Dave Farney built what is now the lunch cabin. Dave had a dream of what was then going to be called the Little Annie ski area on the backside of Aspen Mountain. And Dave was the one who originally accumulated all the CCI parcels. Unfortunately, that company went bankrupt, and John bought the property at the courthouse steps out of foreclosure, and that's what CCI owns today, minus a few parcels that have been sold off in the interim. In 2001, CCI received the 1041 approval from this board by resolution 110-2001, and that's the 1041 approval. And I think Tammy actually said it wasn't recorded, but it is recorded at Plat Book 60, page 54. And it's actually signed by the then chairman and current chairman of the Board of County Commissioners down here.
I was actually signing for the chair, which was McIreland,
Oh,
I was
okay.
vice chair.
All right. It's your signature.
Let me cross his name out.
So that approval actually expired in 2016, unfortunately. So CCI filed an application for an activity envelope in the exact same spot, which, as Tammy pointed out, is right here. Let's see, we only applied for an activity envelope and not a site plan because we haven't designed a cabin yet. The application went to the hearing officer, and mostly we're very happy with the findings and conclusions of the hearing officer. We believe there was one minor mistake that was made, and that's in paragraph number 5, which is entitled Removal of the Lunch Cabin. And it says, quote, prior to issuance of a building permit for a residential dwelling unit, the applicant shall obtain permits and remove the existing lunch cabin structure and associated vault privy. So, as John explained, the issue before you is whether there was a demonstrable error in the application of the facts in the record to the standards of the code. The requirement to remove the lunch cabin is not required in these facts in light of the existing code. And we believe this was just a mistake. And that mistake is demonstrable error. And I think it's fairly easily understood. If I can, how do I get rid of that? Okay. So here's what the hearing officer said, and this is on transcript page 77, and it's in your agenda packet at page 245. He said, you have one principal use on a property, one, by code. And this use is it's agreed that it is not accessory, I think he meant to, the proposed residential use of the property. You can choose. You keep the lunch cabin, or you take this approval. You don't get both. You don't get both. I believe that was an error. What the code says at 41020 is that you can only have one principal residential use per lot. And my guess is that the hearing, and this is just a guess, he didn't say, that he was thinking of this section. There is no, as far as we can find, there's no section of the code that says you can't have two principal uses if one of them's not residential. You've got this one that says you can't have two principal residential uses, but there's nothing that says you can't have a restaurant and a lodge, or, you know, when I was looking at this, I was really surprised to find out a wireless cell tower is a principal use. So you can have a wireless cell tower and you can have a residential home or a cabin or something else on the same parcel. What you can't have is two principal residential uses on the same lot. Unfortunately, I didn't put this in my letter, but I found it yesterday. That's really hard to read for you. But we're only looking for the highlighted portion. How do you, now, this doesn't look normal.
No, it doesn't.
Slide that bar across in the lower right. Oh, there we go.
Oh, yeah. Good.
Glad we got somebody back here.
Oh, yeah. So you just want the highlighted?
Just the highlighted. And I slid the bar too far.
That's okay.
So this is a note to what is table 5-1.A. Note number 1 there states, in the RR zone district, which is where we are, the maximum size of the activity envelope defined for each principal use shall be 1/2 acre. That clearly contemplates each principal use, multiple principal uses. So in the RR zone district, as long as they're not both residential principal uses, you can have multiple principal uses. In the determination, we didn't have any problems with the 1,000 square foot cabin that we were allowed to build, but there is this historically and admittedly non-conforming use of the ski powder tours. And there is also the lunch cabin, which you saw on the map, which is an accessory use to the powder tours. Whoa, we got to get back to that bar. Okay, so section 340.20, legally created structures in the RR zone district existing prior to January 2nd, 1996, which I think is when the RR zone district was approved, may be retained in one of three, if any of the following three criteria. Two of them don't apply, but subsection B does apply. If the existing structure does not contain a dwelling unit, then a new structure containing a dwelling unit may be built, which is what we plan to do. That's the 1,000 square foot cabin, provided that the existing structure is retained as an accessory structure and accommodates accessory uses only. And that's what we plan to do. The lunch cabin will be, or is, accessory to, that is, it is supportive of, and, you know, it is not senior to, but is supportive of the powder tours. So it is an accessory structure, and it's only accessory to that use, that other principal use. Chapter 9, okay, now we're going to get really fancy here, I guess. I got to move this down. Governs nonconformities. It says the standards in this chapter regulate and limit the continued existence of nonconforming uses and structures. This is a historically nonconforming use, but nothing in Chapter 9, and I've read the whole thing a couple of times, requires the removal of requires the removal of an pre-existing nonconforming use when you add an allowed use by right. So we added the allowed use by right, which is the 1,000 square foot cabin. There's nothing in Chapter 9 that says you got to get rid of your pre-existing nonconforming use. And Chapter 9, according to this sentence, is what governs the pre-existing, the continued existence of nonconforming uses. Also, as Tammy noted, this board previously approved the exact same activity envelope. It was back then called a 1041 envelope, but at that point in time, we had the rural and remote zoning for this property, and it was in effect. And you did not require the removal of the cabin when you approved this in 2001. You did require that a vault privy be upgraded, and what happened is an environmental health permit was obtained and the vault privy was upgraded, and that was in Tammy's prior memo for the hearing officer. Let's see, already said all that. Also, the ski company recently, 2012, also after the rural and remote zone district was in effect, obtained a certificate of occupancy for the remodel of the lunch cabin, and the county granted, well, first they filed for a permit for the remodel of it, and then they obtained a certificate of occupancy, and a copy of that, I think, is down here somewhere. Oh, no, right there. One-room powder tour cabin. Now, if you agree with us that this is a pre-existing non-conforming use, that it's allowed to stay, we're going to need to talk about a couple of cleanup issues in the determination, but we can talk about that later when you get there. Now, I do want to take a moment, and I don't know whether I should wait until after Marcella Larson makes her comments, or whether you want to hear from me now, but I did receive the same 40 pages that you got. I got them at 10:39 this morning, although I will say Marcella gave me the professional courtesy of a heads up a couple days ago and told me that this was coming, so it wasn't a complete surprise to me. Do you want to hear my comments on this now, or do you want to wait and hear her?
I'll probably need to hear it twice anyway.
Yeah, and I'm sorry that I was not able to see it before, but we've been in meetings since.
Well, there are 3 primary arguments made in here, and the first argument is essentially that the SKICO has the ability to get a special review approval for the lunch cabin, and the SKICO has the ability, that's the accessory use, to the accessory structure. SKICO has the ability to, or SKICO or John has the ability to get a special review approval for the powder tour use. And then the third point in that argument is that because they have the ability to get the special review approvals, it's not non-conforming. It's a double negative, meaning it's conforming. And the way she gets there is the definition of non-conforming use says, I don't think I have that one. It says, non-conforming use means any use of land, building, or structure that was established pursuant to the zoning and building laws in effect at the time of its development, but which use is no longer permitted under the regulations. And she highlights the no longer permitted. And so what she's saying is that it's not a non-conforming use governed by Chapter 9 because it's no longer permitted. But if you look in your record at transcript page 89, which is your packet page 257, what you'll find is the hearing officer stated on the record, quote, and by the way, in relation to the lunch cabin, recreational buildings are a prohibited use, end quote. So at least the hearing officer and our record disagrees with the Larson family LP conclusion that a lunch cabin is something for which you can get a special review permit. I would agree that theoretically you can get a special review permit for the powder tour use. I don't agree that you can get a special review permit for the lunch cabin as an accessory to that powder tour use. And I would go a little bit farther than that to say, you know, if there was no historical powder tour skiing on that property, and you went out there today and started to try to run a powder touring ski touring operation, that would just be simply illegal. It's not permitted unless, but the definition of non-conforming use doesn't say unless you come in here and go through a process and maybe get a special review approval or not. So, you know, SKICO is out there operating powder tours and has since 1969 for every year without a special review permit. That makes it non-conforming. It's not permitted under the definition of non-conforming use. And the county recently, 2012, granted a certificate of occupancy for that cabin and legalized it. The ski company does not have special review approval because the use legally existed before special review was required. The ski company could convert that non-conforming use to conforming by getting a special review approval as long as there are no changes in the nature of that use. That's not necessary. Because it's pre-existing non-conforming, it was established legally before special review was ever required. The use is, to use the colloquial term, grandfathered.
So, I guess a question for staff. When the ski company received the CEO in 2012 for the use of the cabin, did they go through a special review process?
No, there was no special review process at that point. It was replacement of what was considered a legally created structure. So it was just a building permit process.
Okay.
So could I tag on to that? accessory structures may be retained if they were built prior to 1996, and then the structure was replaced, updated, rebuilt, whatever, in 2012. How does that affect the 1996 statement prior to? Just because it was a replacement, it's still considered it was a structure prior to 1996?
I believe so, since the permit was
clarification at
approved
that
and
point.
issued at that time, I think based on that premise
And
that
they didn't expand
the
it,
prior
they-
structure was legal and it was just a replacement for that, so.
Thank you.
The second argument in the letter asserts that you can't have, or shouldn't be able to have, two principal uses in the RR zone district. Now, and the point I would make with regard to that is the people who wrote the code were very clear. Oh, where did it go? Very able to show that you can only have one principal residential use. It would have been a very simple matter to add one more sentence, or even just take out the word residential, and say you can't have multiple principal uses. But it doesn't say that. What it says is you can only have one principal residential use. So that would have been very easy to do. They didn't do it. And I read for you the note on the existing table 5.1-A, or 5-A.1.
The little print one.
Yeah, the little print one, which clearly shows that that the intent was that you can have multiple principal uses in the RR zone district. The third argument has to do with public notice and scheduling. This hearing that we're talking about was May 30th, 2018. And the code says, with a couple of words deleted, quote, within 15 working days of the receipt of the transcript, an appeal meeting before the Board of County Commissioners will be scheduled to the degree possible for the next regularly scheduled meeting of the board. Okay, we filed our notice on time, we filed our transcript on time, and then I got together with staff to schedule before you for this hearing. Your schedule was last summer pretty darn full. So there was a period of time where you guys couldn't be there. And then after that, I had surgery scheduled. And as a courtesy to me, staff was willing to allow me to go through my surgery and have a period of a few weeks to recover after that before scheduling the meeting for today. What that section of the code says is that it will be scheduled. It doesn't say it will be held at the next regularly available meeting. So I got together with Suzanne and Rye via email, and we scheduled it as soon as we could. We complied with this section of the code.
And here we are today.
And here we are.
So that was, okay.
So we respectfully request that you delete Section 5 of Determination 3-2018.
So we are going to open it up for public comment now. John, we have a new timing system. John's in charge. We're going to see how it works today here. We have not used it in this facility.
Let me have a question first. Jody's asking us to consider deleting Section 5. So under our role today, that would be a modification?
Correct.
A modification, okay. Thanks.
Send it back to staff to create the new resolution to bring forward on the 5th of December.
All right, great, thanks.
I guess if I was really clear, what I would say is make a finding that there was a demonstrable error in the application of the facts to the code.
And modify the resolution.
And modify Section 5.
Okay, so we are doing, and I'm going to look into the board, we're doing 5-minute public comment.
I did have that one question I kind of gave staff a little time to think about.
Okay.
Again, we're kind of being asked to make a determination on language in the code that then other people could use as a precedent at some level. This whole question of principal residential use versus other uses. do you see implications about this decision, one way or the other, depending on how the board votes, that would transfer to other properties or other challenges in the county?
I mean, it certainly could be a precedent. I mean, definitely, this is the language in the code that you know, is very specific about no more than one principal residential use. The idea of multiple principal uses, not necessarily residential, you know, does not have specific language like that in the code. So again, you know, this scenario could be looked at differently. Obviously, we're working from what we refer to as a grandfathered use, but basically a pre-existing legal use on the property, and then the opportunity to have a residential use in addition to that. Again, that may be a somewhat unusual circumstance.
Maybe limiting
in terms
factor,
of setting a precedent.
Because in +2 with the was built prior to 1996, that language comes into. So if somebody, and they'd have to go through special review. I just want to clarify, you'd have to go through special review now that we have special review. Would that be a step somebody would have to take?
Special review for?
If somebody came in and wanted a residential use and an accessory use, would the accessory use then have to come through special review?
We have to look at the use table to see how the use, you know, does that use require special review? Is it a
Depends on
prohibited,
what the
you know, again,
circumstances
it's
are.
right. So that depends on each zone district.
George?
Yeah, because there are cabins up there that have sheds. So sheds would be a separate, a primary use as a shed or storage.
And just, right, in terms of specific to rural remote, and this language about keeping a legally created structure and then also building a new cabin has been utilized a few times, you know, in the Little Annie Basin specifically. The Matthews property, what was the Judy Haas property that was on Hurricane Road. Again, so that there is precedent there for that piece of.
That's getting to more of what I'm asking. And even
Okay,
if we weren't in rural and remote, you could have someone with a lot and they could have a principal residence and then a agricultural operation, which would be a separate
Greenhouse.
principal use or greenhouse, but it wouldn't be a principal residential. So I just want to make sure you weren't going to see this thrown back in your face later regarding additional properties. But if you've already dealt with it and you've already basically made approvals based on that sort of language interpretation.
Well, yeah, we have seen some of these scenarios.
Thank you.
Patty?
Yes, Steve, go ahead.
I've been struggling with the definition of accessory use or accessory structure. And now in reading it, if we accept that there could be two principal uses of the property, two or more, in this case two, and then the accessory use or accessory structure means a use or structure that is naturally and normally incidental to, subordinate to, and devoted primarily to the principal use or structure on the land. So if there are two principal uses of the land, then the lunch cabin would be an accessory use to that use of the land, that principal use of the land, if I'm reading it correctly.
Right, I would.
It would not be an accessory use to the residence that's proposed to be built.
Correct, I would agree. It's accessory to the Powder Tours operation as a principal use.
So therefore, if you look at the requirement that an accessory structure or a structure that's not an accessory structure needs to be removed if a residence is built, would be null and void, because it's not an accessory structure to the residence but to the other principal use of the land. You see what I'm saying?
No.
The picnic cabin is not an accessory structure to the residence if we accept that there are two principal uses. In the code in 340-20 D1, it has a condition: if the existing structure does not contain a dwelling unit, then a new structure containing a dwelling unit may be built, provided that the existing structure is retained as an accessory structure and accommodates accessory uses only. So the picnic cabin would be an accessory structure to the skiing use
Right.
of the land.
And I think
it couldn't be used as a residence, but it can still be used for the purpose of the.
Right, there's no intent to use it as a residence. But I do think Jody's referred a lot to, in the determination from the hearing officer, the condition, number 5, but there is also a recital from the hearing officer, number 11, which I think I'll just read to, because I think maybe this is getting to, might help you and as you consider this, but the hearing officer further finds that the existing lunch cabin utilized by Aspen Skiing Company for powder tours is not accessory to a future residential dwelling unit. Therefore, it is a principal use. Only one principal use on the property is allowed. Therefore, prior to issuance of a building permit for a residential cabin, the existing lunch cabin structure and associated vault privy shall be removed. That last sentence is similar to the condition, but I think the first part of that, sort of the finding about, was how the hearing officer was looking at that.
And the key
issue.
word in that is still residential. Residential principal use. You know, you can have one residential principal use.
You're talking about.
Well, again, right, from the hearing officer was saying only one principal use is allowed.
But the key word in the code says only one principal residential unit.
Where is it?
So Jody, you had a clarification, I think, that you were looking at when Suzanne was speaking?
Well, actually, it was in response to what Steve was saying. There were, if you look at this language, the second highlighted part, the existing structure is retained as an accessory structure. It doesn't say as an accessory structure to a residential structure. It just says an accessory structure. So it can be accessory to any principal use.
So in this case, it would be an accessory to the ski business.
Ski tours.
Yeah.
And that's the only use that's been made of it for many years.
Okay. So now we're going to open up the public comment. So Marcella, if you'd like to come over. Suzanne, can we borrow your mic over there? And then John, you want to explain your timing procedure?
So, Patty, the board wanted to keep to 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll have a timer at 4 minutes. The screen will turn green. At just on this, just on the little iPad here, Marcella.
He wanted to put it up on the big screen, and I said, no, we're going to keep it to the little screen.
At 30 seconds left, it'll turn yellow, and at the end of 5 minutes, it'll turn red. So hopefully we can time it without having to interrupt anyone.
No, we're not like, it's kind of like C-SPAN, but different.
Okay, don't start yet.
Can I ask a question before she starts, if you're getting ready? Were you about to say you needed time, or did you?
No, we're giving it, you can ask a question.
I just wanted, looking at item B here, I'm still trying to understand, literally it says the existing structure is retained as an accessory structure and accommodates accessory uses only, but I can't help think that it's referring to the dwelling unit.
No, it's referring to, there's no dwelling unit. So the existing structure right now is the lunch cabin.
I'm looking at the sentence before that.
Right.
It says, if it does not contain a dwelling unit, then a new structure containing a dwelling unit may be built, provided that the existing structure is retained as an accessory structure and accommodates accessory uses only.
Yeah.
But it's not specific to that dwelling unit.
Right.
But it doesn't say it has to be specific.
Doesn't say it has to be
So,
specific.
so that second clause, then a new structure containing a dwelling unit may be built, is we may build a 1,000 square foot residential cabin somewhere else on the parcel.
And still retain an accessory structure.
Right.
Doesn't say they have to, there's a nexus
The
between
property has, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's my understanding that there is a lease associated with the property for the ski tours.
Technically, it's a license, but yes.
Yeah, license. So it is that license to use that property, to my mind, creates the need for an accessory use. mean, it's been an existing primary use of that structure, but not as a residence, and that the lease or the permit, however the arranged contract is made, is an accessory. It runs with the land of
Relies on the accessory.
the property. So.
Okay.
But
I'm gonna make sure Marcel's.
I have only 2 copies of this. I asked for it to be distributed. Do you?
Well, our
got
meeting,
it by
yeah,
email.
but I just picked it up now because we
I
got
didn't
it
either.
actually afternoon and we were already in meetings. So I would love a hard copy though, Marcella,
And for Jeanette can have hard.
and one for Jeanette for the record.
If I can get it back.
I'm gonna keep
I
mine.
don't need it, unless somebody else does. I'm not gonna read it now.
I'd like to look at it, sure.
Okay. Wait, make sure she's ready before we hit that button. Ready, set, go. Okay.
Let's
Every second
see how
counts.
quickly I can talk. My name is Marcella Larson. I am the manager of the Larson Family LP, which is an adjacent landowner. We participated in the hearing officer determination and appeared at the hearing. I did submit a very detailed letter on this fairly complex legal analysis. And I encourage you to read it before you actually make a decision. And I apologize that I didn't get it out to you sooner. I had a pipe break yesterday at my house. If you all have had that happen, that's what I spent my day doing. And as Jody indicated, I made him quite familiar with everything that I would be arguing, and we attempted to talk through it. Hearing Officer Tom Smith is a highly experienced land use attorney, former county attorney, and longtime hearing officer. He carefully considered the argument and evidence presented by CCI and granted CCI an approval based on his considerable expertise in code interpretation. So take your time in deciding what you want to do here, and if you're inclined to do anything other than deny this appeal, please remand the matter back to the hearing officer for him to actually have the opportunity to create a better record on many of these matters that have been raised by Mr. Edwards and CCI, really for the first time in connection with this appeal. Things that were not discussed in great detail before the hearing officer. And the reason we participated in this hearing was not just because we were concerned about access issues. We're very concerned about Pitkin County actually following the land use code, and in particular the restrictive provisions of the rural and remote zone. Okay, so through this appeal, you are actually being asked to make changes to the hearing officer's determination that are beyond your jurisdiction. The lunch cabin very, very clearly requires special review approval. And I'll get to this whole very confused analysis and incorrect, legally incorrect notion of grandfathering, a term which does not appear anywhere in the land use code. So the section that you really need to look at is 4-10-70C, which makes it abundantly clear that special review is required for retention of the lunch cabin. It states, in the rural and remote zone, accessory structures existing before the 5th of July 2000 may continue in use if a special review approval is obtained. So this clearly contemplates a use that was existing, was legal, yet requires a special review use. And the same goes for power towers. So it doesn't make their use non-conforming the fact that they've failed to obtain special review approval. That is just entirely backwards and not based at all on any law relating to nonconformities. I mean, imagine what that means is you can create a nonconformity by not actually complying with the code. It makes no sense. So we're here today because CCI seeks two fairly intensive principal uses in one of the most restrictive zone districts in the code. Back in 2001, the way that this lunch cabin was retained was actually a provision in the growth management code that allowed for the unit to be deed restricted for residential use for residents only. Somewhere along the line, and I don't don't have any information about why. In 2011, ski company pulled a building permit, which actually changed the use. It's on the face of the permit from residential to commercial. There was no land use process associated with that particular action. And it's important to note that the hearing officer is not taking away the lunch cabin. And you know, what the applicant should do, in my view, is actually apply for special review uses of those two uses. And then if they really feel that an extra principal use is appropriate in the rural and remote zone, which the very plain language of the zone itself and the definition of principal in the land use code indicates quite to the contrary, then they should move to actually amend the land use code so, you know, this approval can be done properly and in accordance with law. Okay. All right, thank you. I urge you to please read the letter that I've submitted and not make a decision until you've received legal advice around this area, because I believe you're being asked to commit substantial error.
Thank you. Thank you, Marcella. Okay, I'm going to bring it back to the board.
I would like to hear the applicant's response to those concerns.
I disagree. Do you want me to, I kind of went through her letter once before. I can go through it again.
Well, just because we've never had a chance to read it, and as George said, it takes twice to sink in sometimes anyhow.
Right.
So
3 times.
It's dense material.
You know, and I'm going to make it specific, maybe, because I wrote down the need for special review, that for the new, you know, because we're saying that special review didn't apply at that time. Now I'm hearing that it should have applied, and so I need some clarification there.
Special review didn't apply at what time?
Well, at the time they came back in for the rebuild, is that right?
The replacement?
Yeah.
Let me ask a question along with that. I mean, is that was that something that the hearing officer should have considered, did consider?
Well, the issue in front of the hearing officer is the application itself, not code enforcement or evaluation of existing uses. So he's confined in his analysis to just the application that's in front of him.
Okay.
And in doing so, he looks at the property itself, its situation, and what's on the property and what the property is currently being used for.
And so, because that wasn't sort of under his obligation, and as we're reviewing the hearing officer's remarks, how does that fit into our discussion?
I think it comes to the finest point where the hearing officer states in condition number 5 and implicates in condition or recital number 11, I think it was, that this idea of one principal use. The distinction there being the points that are raised by Jody primarily in the code language itself, in that the code clearly contemplates more than one principal use on a rural and remote property, and by extension, given that there are no limitations to any other property in another zone district in the county, the exclusion for more than one principal use is limited to residential structures, so that no more than one principal residential structure would be allowed on a particular piece of property. And that would be, I would assume, something that the code included simply because a configuration of a piece of property might be such that the underlying zone district would allow multiple units without an infraction against the unit density that's allowed per property, or on a given acreage. So the restriction is clearly limited in the code. So I think that it comes back to the board on that issue.
Okay, thanks.
But you never, my question got lost.
No, I'm sorry, Patty, but
It's okay, I'll find it again.
yeah.
Special review, should it have applied or should it not have applied? I mean, I'm hearing a black and a white.
To the renewal.
In 2011 for the building permit when it came through.
No.
Okay.
And the reason that we'd say that is that the use, which was the cabin, was established prior to any special review being required for such a structure. The use at the time that the structure was built included residential use, at least on some limited basis. County records aren't complete as to the extent of that, although it appears that it was seasonal, just summertime. It wasn't used in the wintertime. In the wintertime, its use was strictly related to the powder tours.
Right.
So when the property came in 2011, 2012,
11 for permit built in 2012.
it was to replace an existing structure.
That technically was kind of grandfathered into the process without having to go through special
And
review.
grandfathered is a colloquialism.
Right.
That is an implication of the fact that something is existing on the ground in some form of vested right.
Right.
Either because it's physically on the ground or it's a use that's been conducted and uninterrupted since it was initially established when no permit or no special review was required.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Jody.
I agree with John.
Okay, where does the board want to proceed? Marcella's request is that we don't make decision until we've had time to review and utilize her letter as we received just now into our decision-making process. I'm just, because, you know, if we continue this, just so you know, continue it to the 5th, I am not here. So the next meeting is the 19th, which I think is already a packed agenda. So the next one after that is next year.
Yeah, I think we should be able to make a decision. We've heard both sides. We've heard from our attorneys. I'm comfortable being able to make a decision. We've heard from Marcella, and she had the opportunity to respond to Jody's interpretation of his reading of the letter and the issues. And it's going to be as clear as mud to me whether I move forward now or later. So,
Patty, there may be additional public comment out in the audience.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Are there any other members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Okay, I'm going to bring it back, but thank you for reminding me. I did see some new faces come into the room, so I'm sorry. I was just concentrating so hard. So I'm going to close the public comment at this time, bring it back to the board.
Do you have any questions for the SKICO guys?
I don't, we'll just see if the board has any, and we'll call them up if we do.
I think so.
Okay, I'm looking to the board.
well, for me anyway, it seems to make sense that there was confusion in terms of the interpretation of that Section 5 that we've been discussing here. And so I would agree with Jody that I would modify and delete that Section 5.
And recital 11? We have to modify them both?
Yeah, you have to make a finding first of demonstrable error.
Demonstrable error.
Or is there a suggestion of what?
I think the staff's recommendation contains a suggestion. If the board agrees with what George is putting forward, then the suggestion would be to direct staff to come back with a resolution that the board can adopt.
And in that resolution, the direction from the staff, the board to staff would be that there's a finding of demonstrable error and deletion of sections.
Right, and that would
5
be
and recital
and that would be
7.
presented
12.
for acceptance by the board based on comments by the board today.
And I have another question, just to muddy the water even further. If it comes back on the 5th, and we've had further time to look at this letter, we can change our mind on the 5th?
That's correct. You're not taking, well, if you go that route, you would not be taking a vote today other than to continue the matter to the 5th or
Well, I want
whatever
to, you
date.
need to see the reso in hand, I think, in order, we have to bring it back anyway for us to vote on the actual reso with these decisions on it, right?
This is a two-read? This is a two-read?
No, it's
This
not
is
a two
single
read.
reading, but we have a new reso that comes forward on the 5th with direction.
Okay, so we direct staff to come back with the reso,
Yeah,
and then,
and that's a one read,
Yes,
yeah, okay.
public comment?
unless the public comment is closed today.
That's what I was going to ask.
I want to be clear on why we wouldn't remand this back to the hearing officer.
Well, at least for me, it's, if we're able to make the correction here, we're able to save a lot of time and trouble. I mean, it's just that.
We don't necessarily have to remand it back. We can make the decision
It's a
ourselves.
choice we have,
We
right?
have that choice, and, you know, certainly the hearing officer be informed of our decision should it be changed, but it's just a matter of time.
Yeah. Time, trouble, and cost.
Yeah.
There's a cost associated with the hearing officer.
Yeah.
So if we can't make a decision, then that may be the appropriate way to go.
Yeah.
But if we can make a decision, then
I'd like to read the letter before I
Well,
feel confident making the decision.
Yeah, no, I agree with the direction of moving something forward and coming back and finalizing it when we have it written. I would like to see that resolution discuss this matter a little more thoroughly, you know, and create a record of our own as it's adopted in terms of what these terms mean, how code was interpreted to get to this point. You know,
The code says one principal residential use, and this is an accessory use, therefore allowed by the code.
And the findings that were made about needing to be in special review or not special review because it was a pre-existing structure prior to those codes. That's all.
yeah, and that's not really unusual for us to look at updating codes. We do that all the time whenever issues like this or other issues come before us, because code's written under sort of one lens, and then there's always interpretations and different issues that come before us, and so we're always trying to clarify and update codes as we move along.
Yeah, and this is a clarification, not an update.
Yeah.
Update would go
So
through
George, would
PNC.
you put that into a formal motion, and then we can have a second, then I have a comment?
I'm looking for wording.
Well, move that what do you want to do with public
We're gonna
comment?
keep the public comment open.
Okay, then a motion to continue the public comment and this appeal until whatever date the board wants to use, the 5th or 11th are the ones that are coming up.
Well, staff will bring forward a
And
formal resolution.
with direction to staff to bring forward a resolution for the board to consider that discusses the matters raised in the course of this hearing and puts forward a finding that the hearing officer, what did he do? He committed demonstrable error, and that the board then, the action would be to modify the hearing officer's
To remove sections 5
Determinations.
and 11
and
on
would,
either side.
the sections would be enumerated. And for consideration of the board at that time. And as Patty mentioned, the board can change its mind. It's not a final vote on the issue of the appeal until that date. What you're doing now is directing to staff to produce something for your consideration, and you're continuing the matter. So if in the intervening time the board considers something else
Keep going, Jeanette.
and doesn't like to do this, then you can go forward.
So basically, we're I'm saying that I'd present a motion that we find the hearing officer did have a demonstrable error. We're asking staff to modify those specific sections, come back to the BOCC with a resolution at our next regular meeting for final discussion and vote.
So we're going to continue the public hearing, and I'm going to request, because I want the opportunity to read this, And I won't be here on the 5th, so I would like to request that we do it on the 19th. I know that's a crazy day, but I think we'll be where we need to go, and I would like to be part of the decision-making, because I won't be here on the 5th. That's our Carbondale to Crested Butte Trail meeting.
Great.
So bring it in, you know?
Can we be ahead of that on the agenda?
And it's the Pick and Cares Awards that morning, too. So, but I would honor that request. It just will be a long day.
Don't look at me like that.
Well, I hope all of us will be here that day.
Well,
because there's
I
always
want
a
to be
chance that
part of
someone
this
could be
because
gone.
I would like to have
Yeah,
the
no, that's
opportunity.
fine. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Okay. I will run a very efficient meeting that day, I promise, because it will be my last.
That would be more efficient than mine.
On the 5th.
Okay, so
I made a motion, and we had a date to come back at our December 19th meeting.
Yes, please.
I'll second the motion.
Any further discussion? I'm going to call the question.
When the staff comes back to us, hopefully there'll be a thorough discussion of unforeseen and unintended consequences beyond the horizon that I have right now on this.
I'm not sure what that meant, and staff's looking at you with the
She
same expression I have.
She doesn't even look puzzled.
We'll work on that.
I guess I just want to,
Okay.
verify that I'm still confused enough and concerned enough that we want to get this right. So,
Steve, did you have a?
So I'm convinced that there was a clear and demonstrable error, but then I think Marcella, just in the short time she had, cast some doubt as to whether the ski cabin and the ski operation would or would not require a special use permit process. And so if in the staff analysis of this and the new resolution,
Can clarify
if
that?
they could clarify that point from the staff viewpoint, I'd
I think that
appreciate
was already included in the motion
Yeah.
through the discussion.
Memorialize it, though. It's very good.
thank you.
Yeah.
All right, any further discussion on this item? I'm going to call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you all. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks. Do we have any open discussion? I have one short thing, and actually I'm going to just direct it to Mr. Peacock. It's my understanding that the City of Aspen, the Aspen Chamber Resort Association, and the Aspen Lodging Association are, the city's gonna hire a position, and they're gonna mutually fund it, I'm not sure those arrangements, for about short-term rentals. And I would like you just to maybe touch base with Steve Barwick, direct him to the Northwest COG website, because they should have some information there, and just ask if we can just follow along. We don't want to be a direct partner in this at this time, but I think it's something that we should just tell them that we're aware of, and also Northwest COG.
Yeah, just a question further. Are they wanting to just get an idea of how much inventory there is out there?
I have no idea.
Or, okay, but excuse me, we're still finishing our meeting.
We still have
So
our
I got
meeting,
it.
if you
Yeah.
could bring the conversation in the lobby.
Yeah, and that won't take a minute, Patty. I just.
No, I know, just for the.
I just, when you had, the term you used, we just follow along, there may be a bigger role for us, but particularly the appropriate tax collection from rental properties. So, I just wanted to say that, I'm not sure what the project is,
I'm
but.
going to have John open the door with Steve Barwick. I just don't know if we're ready to jump as a funding partner.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know anything about it, so I will contact and we can bring that conversation back to the
Yeah, I
board.
was kind of surprised that they didn't approach the county and let us know they were going to be doing that, since we are also involved in short-term rental issues.
Yeah, and I think I've said it before, but the town of Breckenridge and Summit County have had a very good relationship and process on dealing with those sort of things.
And the information is on the COG website. It's just that I don't think that the city pays attention to the COG website, so that would be some information they might save them time, energy, and money.
True.
All right, anything else from the board? Thank you, guys. We did much better than I thought.
Jeanette, did you want this back?
I would make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second that motion?
I have a motion, I have a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you, thank you. And the issue tonight is at 6 o'clock. Thank you, Grassroots.